Look, we all know we need to build a green energy future. But let's be real, switching the entire planet off of fossil fuels isn't just a tech problem. It is one of the biggest, most expensive projects humanity has ever attempted. So for this explainer, we're going to park the science for a minute and just follow the money. What is the real price of going green? When we think about this future, we picture something like this, right? Clean, bright, full of hope. But underneath that vision, there's a pretty harsh economic reality. The price tag for building this new world is, well, staggering. And, as we're about to find out, that price is climbing. Fast. Let's just start with a number that'll make you sit up. 163 billion euros. A recent report out of the Netherlands found that just because of recent interest rate hikes, their energy transition is now going to cost an extra 163 billion by 2050. I want to repeat that. This isn't the total bill. This is just the extra fee tacked on by changes in the financial world. So why are green projects so sensitive to this stuff? Well, it's pretty simple. A normal power plant has ongoing fuel costs for its whole life. But a wind or solar farm? Almost all the cost is up front. You have to spend billions to build it, but after that, the fuel, the sun and the wind, is totally free. That makes these projects capital intensive, which is just a fancy way of saying the cost of borrowing all that money at the start is a massive part of the final price. And what's really fascinating is where these extra costs are piling up. If you look at this chart, you can see the data shows the biggest hits are in solar and offshore wind. Oh, and the infrastructure you need to actually get that power to people. I mean, these are the exact technologies that are supposed to be the backbone of our green future. And all this kicks off a really dangerous domino effect. Costs go up, so private investors start backing away. That means governments have to jump in with more subsidies, but they don't have endless cash. The result, you guessed it, a huge risk of delays. And here's the real kicker. Tech like solar and wind, which were finally getting cheap enough to stand on their own 2 feet, might need taxpayer money all over again. The whole transition just slows down. You know, this whole problem with funding isn't exactly new. To really get a handle on the challenges today, it really helps to look back at the last time a ton of private money rushed into green tech and why it turned into a complete and utter disaster. This is the story of Silicon Valley's first big, wrong bet on clean energy. So picture the mid-2000s. Silicon Valley was on fire. Climate change was suddenly everywhere, and venture capitalists, still riding high from the dot-com boom, thought they'd found the next gold rush. The famous investor John Doerr even said it was bigger than the internet. But just a few years later, by 2011, the dream had totally collapsed. Billions of dollars were gone, and the word clean tech was basically poison to investors. So what on earth went wrong? Well, it was a fundamental mismatch. The whole VC model is built for software. You know, low starting costs, super fast development, and hopefully a big payday in less than 10 years. Clean tech is the exact opposite. It's about hardware. It's about physics and material science. You need huge amounts of money to build factories, and it takes years and years of patient R&D. It just wasn't a good fit. And don't just take my word for it. A working paper from the MIT Energy Initiative in 2016 really nailed down where the carnage was worst. It wasn't the software ideas. No, the biggest losses came from the companies with the biggest dreams, the ones trying to invent and mass-produce totally new materials and processes, like next-gen solar panels or advanced biofuels. I mean, this image really says it all, doesn't it? You can't just move fast and break things when you're dealing with the laws of thermodynamics. Taking a new chemical process from a tiny lab beaker to a gigantic factory is unbelievably hard. It's expensive, and it takes forever. It's just a completely different universe from scaling up a website, and the VC model just completely shattered when it tried to do it. Okay, so if the traditional ways of investing are struggling to build this new world, where are the trillions of dollars we need going to come from? Well, this brings us to a really fascinating and honestly a pretty wild idea. What if the solution isn't some careful, rational investment plan, but an actual full-blown financial bubble? All right, first things first, let's just be clear what we're talking about. A speculative bubble is basically when investor hype goes nuts and pushes the price of something, a stock, a house, anything, way, way beyond what it's actually worth. And we usually think of them as terrible, destructive things that always end in a crash. And some experts think we might be seeing the start of one right now. As economist Thorsten Leonard points out, the crazy excitement around green stocks today looks an awful lot like the hype around tech stocks back in the late 90s, right before the dot-com bubble popped. But here is the really provocative question. What if that's not a bad thing? What if a financial bubble, something we are taught to see as a total negative, is actually the one thing that could turbocharge the energy transition? So how could this possibly work? It's basically a four-step process. First, the hype machine drives green stock prices through the roof. Then, because their stock is worth so much, these companies can raise a ton of cash by selling off just a tiny piece of their business. This makes their cost of capital plummet. And suddenly, building that multi-billion-dollar factory or funding that long-shot research project gets way, way cheaper. It actually feels a ton of real-world progress. And you know what? We've seen this movie before. The dot-com bubble was pure financial mania. And yeah, the crash hurt a lot of investors. But when all the smoke cleared, we were left with something incredibly valuable. A massive overbuilt network of fiber optic cables that became the physical backbone of the internet we use every day. So the theory is, a green bubble could do the same exact thing, leaving behind the factories, the wind farms, and the grid we so desperately need. What all of this really goes to show is that the road to a clean energy future is anything but a straight line. The end goal is clear, but paying for it means dealing with market failures, rising costs, and maybe, just maybe, even figuring out how to harness the crazy, irrational power of a financial mania. It is so much more complicated than we usually let on. So I'll leave you with this final thought. The insane hype of the dot-com bubble accidentally built the digital world we all live in today. So, if we really are on the verge of a green bubble, what kind of world will it build for tomorrow?